Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thanks for joining me for this week's YouTube Wednesday to talk about a producer tip. And with this tip, it's just going to be kind of a rundown memory lane. I'm going to be revisiting a track that I did some time ago that I actually felt proud of when I finished it, and I think it'll be interesting to revisit it now 2 years later to see the different things I've learned. I did it with another track called The Get Down that I released a long time ago, and then it did tremendously well under Milty Evans' Whitebeard Records. So the track I'm going to revisit is Ode to Chicago. This time I'm actually going to take a bit of a different approach, and hopefully you can see a bit more of what's going on here. I got the previous version of Logic loaded up. This is Logic 9. I'm now on Pro, but I still run them side by side because when I made this track, obviously it was 9, and sometimes I like to go back and refer to things just to see, again, the different things I've learned. So the track we're going to be visiting is called Ode to Chicago, and I took it from this Jimmy McGriff record, From What's Going On. You guys would probably know it in the breakdown of the song where it goes da 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 da. Every time I used to play that out, a lot of people would just be like, yeah, that's the jam, and they knew it was an interpretation of another song, but couldn't quite grasp what the sample was. And this record means a lot to me, actually, because copy I got, my dad's copy here, Jimmy McGriff actually signed it. Don't know if you could see that, but he actually signed it from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but the tone of his playing, before he went away from doing his day-to-day job as a policeman and went full-time with jazz, like, you could see just and hear the unbelievable amount of skill. And he played the Hammond B3 organ. So with that, what that meant was, I was always fascinated by this as a kid, was the tone of the bass. And my dad told me, that he's playing the bass with his feet, right? If you see the old school Hammond B3s, it's a double deck keyboard, and the bass pedals are actually at the foot level, and you see guys who still play it today rocking it like that, and it's just unbelievable skill. So I always loved the tone of bass in that record, and when I heard some samples from Eddie Harris talking about his love of Chicago, I just thought it would make sense to try and build a track around it. I'm just going to take you through a breakdown of different portions of the actual sample. If you want to hear the full sample, you can go on YouTube, search up Jimmy McGriff, and I'm sure you'll find the whole song there, and you'll get a flavor of what bits and pieces I took. But I'm going to play you what I call the main loop here. And just mute this hi-hat. So with this, I love this loop because it has, I know right now it's kind of filtered, but if I were to take off these effects, you'll hear what I'm talking about. It's got like a nice little organ riff in it. Wow, so that's interesting. So there's an obvious EQ here. There's a cut up to about 205 hertz at a 48 dB slope, which tells me, looking at this now, that there's a lot of rumbling bass tones in this. So if I take this EQ off, we should be able to hear it. So if you can hear that, I'm not sure if you can hear it over the speakers too well, but you can hear the bass, like from the kick drum of whoever's playing the drums. It almost sounds live, like there's a lot of noise behind it. So that drove me to make a pretty deep cut in this area to make sure the kick and bass, when I decide to play over it, cuts through. But man, this loop is just so dope. So I'm just going to put the EQ back on. You hear the difference, there's a lot of the bass gone. Interestingly, I added what is the Sugar Bites Wow. And this is a filter package. This is like a filter plugin. And I think I put this here because it had a distortion offered through its overdrive mechanism. I can't expand it. But this is the 32-bit version of this plugin. You'll see there's overdrive, resonance, and cutoff here. So I used it as a distortion piece, and then I think for the actual filtering of the sample in different parts of the song, yeah, I used the standard Logic filter. So here's what it sounds like, yeah, with all of that on there. And then this is like the cueing part for the DJ. So I'm gonna let this roll. Yeah, this is like the last 16 bars of the intro before we get into the main part of the track. That bass, man, it's dope. I invite you to listen to the original sample. You hear what I'm talking about. And then I think it opens up here. Yeah. So this is like that part of the sample that I knew would be like, hey, get ready. We're gonna get into the real bits of things. Wonder what that sounds like. The EQ. Let's listen to it with the EQ bypassed. Yeah. That bass is no fucking joke. And he's playing that with his feet. And the tones and the analog nature of it is what I wanted to make sure I brought back here. So I mean, I was inspired by this track since I was a kid. My dad used to kill this record, as I said before. But the other loops, and you'll hear these same vocal bits in Ode to Chicago Part 2.
I lived in Chicago.
On Guest House Music. So it's Eddie Harris, famous jazz saxophonist who happens to be from Chicago. And I've always loved his material, especially his vocals on this.
I lived in Chicago. I mean, I lived in Chicago a lot of motherfucking years. Of course, though, I live in the black section.
So, anyway, I've used this vocal many times. I won't be coming back to it anytime soon. I think I've killed it, but it served its purpose. So, I rocked it with that, and just to go back to the main loop, the organ loop from Jimmy McGriff, I knew that having this riff as the main part of the track, if you play it throughout here, like I just had it like
Chicago,
different filter parts.
I live in Chicago.
Different filter parts to make sure the vocal had a pocket to pop out and it makes. And what I mean by that, and I think I shared this before in another video, where it instead of like aggressive EQing, you can use some filter pieces to create openings in the frequency range for vocals to pop and so forth. And I knew with this track, certain parts I wanted to make sure his vocals stood out. So you can see the automation here. Not sure if you can see that completely, but the main loop is just like at a kind of at a closed level of the filter, and then it opens up here. That actually created some nice healthy tension because people are waiting for it in the song as it's being banged out. So that is the main loop against the vocals. The other special thing about this song is I played a lot of different instruments against the loop. So yeah, so this is a chord. So when I knew what key the sample was in, I knew I needed to layer a chord in there to give it. I wanted a little bit of a dark feeling, and I just went with an organ. I think it was the stock organ from Logic. Yeah. So there's Logic's B3 that I leveraged for that chord there. And then at this time, this is back in like 2014, I used to play the clavinet piece a lot. I do clavinet stabs in there all the time. Yeah. And with that, in order to make that sound beefy, let's see where. Oh, I didn't really do much to it. I put it through another bus. Yeah, another bus that had a compressor, the PSP, right there. Chilling, so I passed it through there. So that's the right compressor for the keys. So it sounds a little light, it sounds a little thin. This is with it on. Yeah. So I passed that. That was like, I think, one note, but I played it percussively. And interesting. I changed the velocity of some of the notes to give it a swing or a sense that things are being played live. Then I added another clavinet stab. Yeah. And I think that's that's also going to the same bus where the clavinet piece is playing. So let's hear it all together. And you'll see what I'm talking about with the main loop. You gotta listen to it so carefully that it tells you where to play stuff, right? So there. Right here. As you can see, everything just comes together. So those are the loops, as well as other instrumentation I added. And another, beside from the vocal, I knew another vital part was the bass that I have to play over it. Because, as I shared earlier, there's so much bass and rumbling undertones from other instruments in the original recording of the sample. I knew I had to play my own bass and just make it gel. And I do this often. There's a time and place for everything. But I color-coded my bass here in black. Let me just shut off right there. Shut off these hats. So it doesn't sound like much on its own. But again, when you play that main loop over it, clavinet. So it's all just gelling nicely, and that was a pretty simple bass line. I didn't want to go stupid crazy with it. Two notes. Oh, my bad, it's 3 notes. And I wanted one to just be like a straight, it almost felt boom, doo, doo, doo. Again, where it had feel in it. So I made sure I have different velocity for the notes. And it's not, as I look at this now, I mean, and I still do this to this day. I think a lot of things clicked for me here as a producer, where I was like, nothing has to be perfect. The bass is not even quantized. There's notes that mimic. There's the technique's called greasing, where your fingers are on a one note and then it just slides to the next one immediately, like and that's what's happening here. And that's pretty much it. I put in some signature stuff with my drums that I used to do like about 2 years ago. You'll hear it in the breakdown here. Play it. I do that like regular. And I added the vocals.
Everywhere I live, they seem to call the motherfucker the black section.
Like that.
I lived in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for a lot of motherfucking years.
And that's really it. This song really was at a time where a lot of things I learned about putting things in mono, and like as I look at this here, and I heard that originally from Todd Terry and guys like Mr. G talking about the importance of staying in mono, so I made sure I put that in my work template here, and things just clicked. I can't find anything here that I would really do differently on this track, Ode to Chicago 1 on Frosted Recordings. The other thing that this emphasizes to me, coming back and looking at things now, in terms of the different things I've learned, is you don't need a lot of gear to have a great sounding track. You just need to know what to do. And this craziness over here, I'll just expand each of the pieces. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This used to be my mastering chain, which have all been disabled here because I just learned that having all of these crazy plugins, whether there's factory or third-party plugins, is not necessary. What matters is how things are sounding in the dynamic range you're getting off of your sound. So all of that was disabled. As I look at the faders here, I'm working at an average of minus 5 dB, whereas previously I used to have things like at almost 0 dB, thinking the opposite. The louder that I get things to the mastering engineer, the better. So you live and you learn through these techniques. And Ode to Chicago, a very raw, rugged sample that I was able to hopefully enhance in a manner, in the way in which I heard it for this particular jacket track. So again, I hope this has helped you in terms of my revisiting of this track. Ode to Chicago, of course, is still available on Frosted Recordings. You can pick it up, check it out. But I invite you guys, as serious producers, to go back to the original sample, What's Going On, as covered by Jimmy McGriff, to hear the genius of this man, and it'll open you up to a whole other world of great artists that can influence and inspire your productions in the future. One love to you all. Thanks again. Happy New Year to you guys, and thanks for tuning in and taking part of this. Peace.